Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I am speaking with Mr. Mark Fisher, and we're talking about AI, which I know Mark and Pete have talked about a little bit on the podcast, but Mark and I thought we were worthy of jumping back in again. And on this podcast, we talk specifically about how the current tools available to gym owners in AI land might be useful. And we also get out our crystal ball and talk about what we think is coming down the pike that is both useful and potentially harmful to our business as gym owners. So if you're interested in the topic of AI and want to dive in, this is a great episode for you. Let's get into it. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm back with Mr. Mark Fisher. How are you, my friend?
I am doing pretty well. A little sleepy today, but good.
Yeah, we're recording this right after a holiday Memorial Day weekend. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
It was great. It was a good chill weekend overall. Saw some friends yesterday. Drank a little bit. The theme of the podcast, I keep it being like, I drank a little more than I planned yesterday. But not too much, actually, in the grand scheme of things. So
we should try.
I was going to say, like, I'm drinking like I'm in my 20s. I was like, no, I'm not even remotely drinking in my 20s, but I can't drink quite like I could when I was 39.
Yeah. Friends, we're going to turn this podcast into it. We're going to turn this podcast into a drinking game. Every time Mark talks about having a drink, you drink. Well, let me do this before we dive into today's topic, which is I'm very excited to talk about because we haven't talked about it on the podcast before. I just have a quick shout out to a cool new tool we have on our website. So, dear listeners, we have a free new tool on our website that we just put up there not that long ago. And for many of you, we know it's hard to think of like making the right offer to your leads, to make the right offer to people on your email list, to make the right offers to people on your social media, to make the right offer that's going to get their attention and get them to take action. So what we did is we put together a whole list of our best converting offers into one PDF you can grab right now. There's a link down below in the show notes. You can download it immediately. And like I said, it's a list of all our best performing offers you can put on your social media, in your emails, and all of your marketing efforts to get people to pay attention and convert them. So go grab this free tool and start using it this week. That being said, let's switch to today's topic, which is AI. We're talking about AI again. I know you talked about it with Pete on this podcast. And so those of you who love this topic, go back. There's, I think, 2 episodes where you all touched on this a little bit. But I wanted to bring it up again today because you recently wrote a kind of a long essay that we're going to be releasing to our email list in the coming weeks. So I wanted you to kind of like give a little teaser for what people can come to expect there. And then I thought we could unpack a little bit of what we're hearing and seeing for gym owners in terms of implications of AI now and coming down the pike. So let's start with like, what compelled you to write a long essay on the topic of AI?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about AI the past couple months, pretty obsessively, which is how I tend to operate. I tend to like a thing, and I like the thing I'm interested in, or something about it captures my fascination, and then I find myself, 1.5 into double speeding audiobooks and podcasts and YouTube videos every second I'm awake, to the chagrin of my long-suffering wife, who watches me like putter about the house with like drool coming out as I'm like absorbing as much information as I can on a topic. And in brief, I just think we're really gearing up for a lot of transformation. I think people have a peripheral sense of that. I think most people are actually not really dealing with what I think is almost certainly going to happen over let's say the next 3 to 10 years. So at any rate, so I want to outlay some of my thoughts. It's a little bit of a digression for us, and that like we're talking actually about some fitness business stuff. It's almost not to do at all with the fitness business. It has to do more with like, are you a human? Well, it's going to be really interesting 3 to 10 years for you. And there's going to be probably a lot of disruption coming. And I have a lot of thoughts, not all of them super happy about what I predict will likely be happening as far as who controls these technologies and what that's going to mean for the workforce. But I do think hope is not lost. I'll just like kind of cut to the chase. This can be very overwhelming when we think about this, but I think, I think there's a chance that we can at least influence where this is going and lead to better social outcomes for it. But I feel pretty good about saying at this point, this is going to be much more disruptive and way bigger than the internet and probably the industrial revolution. I'm thinking this is more like electricity or maybe fire. So I'll pull up there, but I think it's going to impact things a lot.
Big deal. Sorry, too long didn't read. AI, big deal. Lots of change.
Lots of change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had a few lovely internal conversations about how much or how little it's worth it for us to be talking about AI. One, that we're not a technology company. We're not, we're not AI experts yet, though you might be on your way to becoming one. Okay. Right. But I think the reason I'm really excited and I think confident in dedicating some of our platform to talking about AI is that it's going to change a lot of people's lives, personally and professionally. And one of the things that we've always tried to do really, really intentionally in Business for Unicorns is that we work with entrepreneurs. It's all personal and it's all professional, right? Our lives don't have hard boundaries. And so even if, our gyms are not in the next year or two directly impacted by AI, we're going to know people in our lives whose lives are directly impacted by AI and even more over time. And so we want to make sure that we're just like making space for these conversations of things that matter in our world, how it's going to change markets, how it's going to change not only our industry, but markets in and around our industry, how we communicate. There's a lot of implications. So I'm glad we're dedicating time to it. And hopefully this will continue to push us to learn more about it and how we can, use it to our advantage as these tools unfold. So let's maybe make it real tangible and tactical for listeners. So let's just talk about right now. With the tools that are available in the world, what do we think gym owners should be paying attention to, and how should they be using the AI tools that we know about today?
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly, maybe I'll start by the thing that I think is like not helpful if you can avoid it, right?
Yes.
And it's hard to speak generally because we have to consider your skill set, your time available, et cetera, et cetera. I think the promise of AI just pumping out tons of content is a thing. AI can do tons of content. And I think probably on a shorter time span, it's going to get harder and harder to see that it was created by AI. And right now, I think it's pretty obvious that things are coming from AI. And I think it's often having the opposite effect, right? Because you think about marketing, a lot of what we're looking to create is likability and trustworthiness. And one can see the seams of AI created content, and it is easier to create, certainly, but I do think it comes at a meaningful cost if you start really pushing out a lot of AI created content and you say it's from you. And specifically here, I'm talking about things going up on your social media's captions, email marketing. Listen, it does allow you to create more stuff. And again, this is why it's hard to speak in generality, because if you're choosing between doing nothing or doing some sort of shitty AI stuff that's like something, that actually might be better than doing nothing, right? If you're not able currently to do anything and you hate writing, you have no interest in being a personal brand. But my suspicion is that I think we've already seen this phenomenon happening, but we've said for many years, right? People want to work with a person and not really with a business. And I think a lot of gyms have a well-intentioned, and it's usually like smaller owner operators that want to look like they're a big business and they're talking to royal we and there's nobody else out there. And they create a very vanilla, inaccessible, very forgettable, professional-ish beige brand. And I think that you'll be able to do a better version of that, because I think even it'll raise the floor for the just okay stuff.
Yeah.
But it's so profoundly not human. I think that's the thing that if you were good at being a human, if you're good at being you, at least for this next bit, right? It might not be, maybe 1, 2, 3 years, it might not be the case. But for now, I think you can out-human the robots. And I think it will actually even be more advantageous because so many of, to put a fine point on it, so many of your less skilled and lazy competitors would just start pumping out just hordes of AI created dribble drabble that is like not human, that's not inviting, that's clearly created by robots, that in some situations is perversely pretending to be written by a human when clearly it wasn't. And I just think right now it's not there yet. And I think it's like off-putting if something is attempting to make it look like it was written by a person, but it's clearly written by AI. So the more I think you can draft on what's unique about you, your imperfections, your humanity, what makes you quirky, and the more you can out-human the robots in the near term.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of looking at it. I think the AI, from my point of view right now, is really good at ideation, right? Generating ideas for blogs, ideas for social media posts, ideas for captions, ideas for blogs, ideas for email marketing.
Yeah.
And I think use it for that. Use it to get unstuck. Use it to get a super shitty first draft. But I think, to your point, Fisher, for now, we still can have a leg up by inserting our own sense of humor, our own personal stories from our clients, the make it personal part, and make it sound like it's coming from a human who cares about other humans and is part of a community of other humans. For right now is a distinction that we can make and stands out. Like you said, they're going to get better and sound more human over time. So that just that ability might go away in the next few years. But for now, I think it really does matter. People have a real healthy skepticism with AI generated content. I mean, you see it now, especially in like video and photo content, where the first comment under stuff online is like, "This is AI." People immediately want to dismiss it or joke about it, or the same thing with AI written things. You all know it. It feels like an AI wrote it for now. Yep. And so I think that's a really great way of thinking about it, is like just lean into your humanity and, find your voice. And I think for those of you who can do that or already have been doing that, it's going to be a differentiator.
Yeah. And again, I think like it is hard, right? Because I'm not suggesting necessarily that everybody needs to be a great writer, right? And I think sometimes people that do what we do, there's a perverse phenomenon, I think, in like the gym business industrial thought leader complex, where the types of businesses that coach gyms are different than gyms, right? Yes. And I think sometimes there's a bias that plays in there that, for instance, will over-index on things like email marketing, right? Because for business like Business for Unicorns, it's super important. For gyms, it's valuable, maybe not as life or death, right? Because you don't have to overcome quite as much of a trust deficit as any coaching business rightfully does, because so many of them are like not great, and it's like a bigger investment. A lot of markets, I don't want to say you can get by with being a little more commoditized, but the reality is it's like they only have so many options of gyms like yours in a certain square mile radius that actually works for them. And again, just by dint of you being a small business, a brick and mortar, there is a little bit more trust built in. And particularly if you've got a good low barrier offer, like you can find many options in the PDF, you can download instant access in our show notes. People can try out what you do without making a big commitment. I think there's less requirement to really develop this very deep and powerful, trusting relationship. But I will say that, in addition to my current claim is in addition to the ideation, I think it's also great actually as a collaborator and editor, right? To the extent that you're already going to be writing some stuff anyway, one or two back and forths that can really punch up and improve what you're doing and give you feedback in a way that's not practical for any of us that run gyms to have people give feedback to every bit of copy we write. It's just like not going to happen. There's no time or budget for that. I think the thing that I find to be least helpful, if you have any skill at this, oddly, is having them write the first draft, because you will often have to just rewrite it so much. Maybe you can get some good structures, and and again, if you don't write it at all, I guess maybe there's some value in it, and then you go in and try to fix it. But in general, it's better, I think, to get ideas, to get hooks. And then once you put together your draft, have them punched up and make it better and tighter and cleaner and clearer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey,
well, let me Business for Unicorns podcast listeners. If you haven't had a chance yet to leave us a rating and a review on wherever platform you listen to this podcast, it would be so awesome if you take just a quick second to do that. And here's why. Number one, by leaving us a rating and review, you'll allow our podcast audience to grow so more gym owners can build a life and a gym they love. And number two, by leaving us feedback, you'll help us shape the future of the podcast so we know what you like, we know what you don't like, and we know what types of content is resonating and what else should we create for you. Thank you so much for your consideration. And now back to the show.
That makes sense. Well, let's think a little bit into the future. Obviously, we don't have crystal balls here, and there's a lot of different, very smart people debating what the future direction of AI is going to look like. But there's some pretty obvious things that seem to be coming down the pike. So what do you think are the kind of obvious things coming down the pike that are both threatening as issues and opportunities? So we'll ask for one on each side of the fence. You want to go first? Yeah, you have some thoughts on this?
Threatening. Well,
in the short term, like let's just bring it into the next year or two.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the next year or two, it's hard for me to think of anything that feels like necessarily like a threat to gyms per se, because I'm pretty actually bullish on gyms, and maybe we should have like let off with this. Like,
we'll scare them first before we make them comfortable.
A gym is a good thing to be in,
Yeah,
because
it's
anything
true.
that deals with human contact, I think people are still gonna want, and anything happening in the physical world, the world of atoms, as opposed to the world of bits, I think you're better off. Now, I don't want to panic you if you have like an online business, but I think those are going to be a lot harder to compete against, because somebody that becomes very, I would say that's maybe like a threat, right? Because if you have very savvy online operators that can now create massive scale of themselves using just hordes of agents and AI, again, you can still probably outhuman some, but that's going to have, I think, like a shorter probably lifespan before a lot of that just becomes a very different kind of competitive landscape.
That's exactly what my answer was going to be. Right? I think that the most obvious threat coming down the pike is AI powering a lot of like the online tools and resources that people use for fitness. I mean, wearables and things have been coming at us for a while. Online coaching and at scale things from Peloton and Apple Fitness and all, they've been coming at us for a while. There's a lot more options, but now a lot of players will be able to scale their content online and scale their really lifelike coaching, right? I've already seen apps coming out with AI that will, if you send it videos, it'll critique your movement, right? You can call it in real time and it'll give you actual coaching cues on the fly in real time. I don't know how good they are yet, but they're already here. This is their first generation. But I think there are going to be people who, as those things scale up, become cheaper and more accessible, and there's more options of them, I think we will lose a handful of people who are probably the people who we would already call fitness enthusiasts, people who already feel pretty self-reliant in their own fitness and are comfortable going to the gym and working out on their own. They can go ask these services or ChatGPT to make them a program. They don't need to hire you for it anymore. They can go into these places and get feedback on their movement patterns, etc. They're not going to need us for it as much anymore. I don't think it's an existential threat to gyms, but I do think it makes the online landscape much more competitive and probably more powerful.
Yeah, I mean the online, again, I'm not trying to panic anybody here. Right?
Yeah,
I think like the online space is going to get really turn on its head. But gym owners, if you're listening, you're a brick and mortar gym owner, again, like you're going to be able to leverage a lot of these technologies, hopefully be a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
I do think a great example of something that's going to get clearly commoditized is probably all program design.
Yep.
Is going to be super, super commoditized, like very, very quickly. Like, because ultimately all program design is you're thinking in algorithms anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
There's no like
it's all algorithmic.
And the part of it that's artistic, because you could argue, I mean, this is a real rabbit hole. I'll resist the temptation to go down. But really, if you think it's math all the way down as I do, everything is algorithms, right? Even art is algorithms, right? Mm-hmm. And in practice, the algorithms, however, to create program design I think that's like pretty easy to outsource to AI. Mm-hmm. The algorithms, which are still there, but it's going to be a long time, I think, before we can break down exactly what's happening, is the actual coaching, the actual in-person, like you're there with the human.
Yeah.
I'm picking up subtly on how you're walking and how you're vibing today. I'm going to let that inform how I'm talking to you, what personal questions I may or may not ask. And then, of course, looking at the movements, eventually that too probably will be assisted with augmented reality, and maybe that'll come fast, I'm predicting. But I think even the ability to like look at a human, look at a deadlift and be able to see like, okay, that, the right knee is caving in and the right foot is winging out, or the hip stance not exactly where it needs to be. That sort of real-time feedback, I think, is going to be, it's going to have a longer tail before that gets disrupted.
Yeah.
But anything where it's just like, I'm writing you emails and sending you programs, like,
sorry about
that
it.
Feels like very replaceable and commoditizable in the near term.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's something about the kind of alchemy of what happens in a room when two people are really collaborating on someone's workout, right? And the coach is really there to support and cheerlead and to observe and advise. And right, there's all of that collaboration happening in real time, which is going to be hard to replicate, but not impossible over time. But I think it'll be hard, and it becomes a unique, selling feature for people who don't want to do the online thing. That coming in person will be continue to be its own experience. What about on the opportunity side, right? I mean, we've already named a few, but what are the tools you think coming? I think we both agree, like agents are probably like one of the greatest opportunities. You want to talk a little bit about what gym owners should be thinking about there?
Yeah. So for those not familiar, the agents basically just like a fancy way of saying like AI that can like actually do stuff, right? Because a lot of us think of the current use of AI as AI's Oracle, which is to say you're talking to Claude or Gemini or Chat or whatever your preferred, chatbot is. You ask questions and you get responses, and they're not without hallucinations, but net like they're pretty dang good at this point and are fantastically impressive. However, one limitation, which arguably is still kind of a limitation, like I'm curious for your 2 cents on this. Like my sense is that agents really aren't like quite there yet, and even the ones that are like break a lot. They're like sophisticated but crappy zaps that just don't perform consistently enough to be super super useful yet. So I think at current they're probably overhyped, and I think they're probably underhyped for maybe where they'll be like, so let's say 2 years. So backing out the gym owners, well, there's probably a lot of things right now that you're having people do. If you familiar with my gym owner task hierarchy, as an example, there's probably a lot of administrative digital tasks right now that you're relying on team members to do or some admin to do that in the very, very near term, I think eventually the AI will be able to take over. And that might be closer to 1 to 2 years. I think that might happen sooner than you might think. Again, probably not there today. I don't know anybody that's like really figured this out. And to the extent that someone says they do, invariably they're selling you a course. They're selling you on how to do it.
100%.
So, but I'm curious if you have a different sense of that. Or
I do think the agents are almost immediately available if you have the needs that they support, right? So the way I understand, again, not an expert on this, but whereas you mentioned ChatGPT and the like are really just like oracles where you ask questions and they have lots of good answers. The agents have a mind that can do all that same reasoning and gather the same information, but they also have a better memory. Well, they'll remember what you want them to do and remember past things a little better than some of the current ChatGPT like models do. And they also have access to tools. So I think their usefulness right now is actually limited by the tools they have access to. And so more and more, there's platforms that are launching all new access to all kinds of tools where you can create your own API into like any platform that has an API. But right now, if you want to use an agent that primarily just fucks with like your Google Calendar and your Gmail and your Google Docs, that's already available, right? They have access to those tools immediately. But there's some other tools that just don't have access to yet. So everything I've seen about agents is that they're really limited by the tools you can give them access to take action on, right? But that's, I think, coming. So I think I would agree with you that like I think gym owners should be thinking in the next year about how we can get payroll costs down. I mean, it does mean we're taking away jobs here, right? Let's just be clear about it, right? That the robots are going to be taking away some jobs, and we just want to be thoughtful about which jobs we're going to be outsourcing first. And I think there's a lot of administrative stuff that gym owners right now are doing with some of their time, and they'd rather be doing other things. And I think some of those tasks, I think agents are going to be able to do in the next year. Some basic bookkeeping and financial stuff, some basic content creation, some basic customer service replies, managing emails and text messages, etc. I think lead follow-up will become more clear. Right now we have like automation workflows that help with that, but they're very static. But agents will be able to treat different people differently, right? So we don't have to have the same lead follow-up process for every person in every situation. They'll be able to be responsive to what each lead kind of needs. And unlike right now, where we kind of have to treat everyone the same because they go through the same step-by-step static workflow, that won't be the case. So I think there's a lot that I think will come down the pike, and I think we'll have to just make decisions based on the logistics of what are the tools good at right now, and the ethics of how much investment am I going to make in AI tools versus in hiring real people. And I think that's going to be an ethical dilemma for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think conventional wisdom, and obviously different people have different perspectives on this, but I'm kind of taking on like the year of 2025 is the year of shitty and mostly useless agents that can't really do anything. And then probably next year's going to start getting very, very, very weird.
Yeah.
Right. When I think about the timelines, my sense is the next 1 to 2 years, things are not actually going to be very different than they are now. Like the chat box will keep like slowly getting better, but what will happen is people will be more and more aware of what's happening. And then I suspect there'll probably be like a 1 to 2 year period where people adjust to what the changes are and maybe start to discount like how dramatic still ultimately it's going to turn out. And then assuming we don't run into some unanticipated bottlenecks, of which we should note there are many, right? There's a gauntlet of technical challenges to be solved. There's all sorts of geopolitical issues that could run the whole thing off the cliff and then just really prevent a lot of the progress that right now people are projecting. But I'll say like three years is when I think things might start getting very interesting, which is sort of strange, right? It's, to me, it's very reminiscent. It feels like not to be like overly dark, but the whole thing feels very December 2019 right now, where it's like, I think there's some things going on. No one's paying attention. I know no one's looking at I think there's some weird things going on. But
well, I think it's a good note to end this on is we have no fucking idea what's coming. No one knows. And we're all just doing our best to kind of be thoughtful and prepared about the things that are here now and what might be coming in the short term. But we didn't do this podcast to encourage anyone to be stressed out or worried or panicked or thinking that anyone has a crystal ball. We don't. But we're just doing our best to kind of pay attention to the shifting landscape so we can continue to help all of you in the form of this podcast and everything else we do to help gym owners thrive. So, let's leave it there, Fisher. Thanks for the great conversation. I'm sure there'll be more about AI and other topics on this podcast. And if you're on our email list,
not just an AI company, right?
Yeah. If you're on our email list,
not AI first, by the way. We're human first. Okay, not AI first.
If you're on the email list, stay tuned for Fisher's upcoming email series where he dives into some big picture thoughts about this pending AI changes. But anyway, thanks for a great conversation, Fisher, and I'll see you on the next one.
Bye.